If you look through my channel, you're gonna see your fair share of Pelicans videos, your fair share of Brandon Ingram videos. So while yes, the Pelicans are the team I root for, Brandon Ingram is my favorite player in the NBA, I'm still coming at this from a completely unbiased standpoint. So am I making this video because it's something that I want to happen? Partly, probably. But I would not be making this video if I didn't 100% believe the things I am about to say. And with that being said, I believe the Pelicans can win the Western Conference. Before we get into other teams and how they match up with other teams, let's just start with the simple fact the Pelicans have 3 players that can get you 30 on any night. There's not a lot of teams that have that. Actually, off the top of my head, the only team I could think of is the Golden State Warriors with, Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, Jordan Poole. Those guys are liable to get you 30 on any given night, and it wouldn't necessarily be a surprise. Maybe you could say the Milwaukee Bucks, but Jrue Holiday can get you 30. Is it really something you expect? Maybe the Milwaukee Bucks are the other team we can mention in that case. We could also talk about the Philadelphia 76ers with the emergence of Tyrese Maxey. Maybe someone even wants to bring up the Toronto Raptors, Gary Trent, whatever the situation may be. I think my point stands that having CJ McCollum as your 3rd best scorer on the team, no other team in the NBA has that luxury. Having a big that can stretch the floor while also giving you 20 and 20 on any given night, to go along with those 3 scores, most teams do not have that luxury. And there's going to be certain matchups where Valanciunas might get played off the court. And if that happens, you have Larry Nance Jr. on the bench, you have Jackson Hayes on the bench, 2 switchable, super athletic bigs to come in and take that spot. Not many teams have that much flexibility up front. Maybe only the Milwaukee Bucks with Giannis, Brook Lopez, Bobby Portis. The flexibility of this Pelicans roster is a very special thing that I don't think people are actually acknowledging. And I will admit, I'm a little bit higher on Jackson Hayes than most people. It seems like he started shooting threes last year, not a high volume, but I really believe in Jackson Hayes going forward. I also dropped a video just showing the chemistry he has with Brandon Ingram. I would not give up on Jackson Hayes. I think he's going to have a huge role in this Pelicans team when it's all said and done. But I spoke about Jackson Hayes and Larry Nance Jr. as far as bringing that versatility to the squad. But Herb Jones and Trey Murphy are really where the versatility kicks in, because you could put Zion at the 5 next to a stretch 4 and Trey Murphy. I would love to see a lineup of CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram, Herb Jones, Trey Murphy, and Zion Williamson. Is that team going to be good on defense? Probably not, but no one's stopping that team. I'm just throwing that out there as an option. I'm not saying that's going to be a go-to lineup or anything. What about a lineup of Brandon Ingram, Herb Jones, Trey Murphy, Zion, Jackson Hayes? The athleticism, the playmaking, just the versatility in this roster. Another reason this roster is so versatile, Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson are far above average playmakers for their positions. I think Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson are better playmakers than CJ McCollum, which allows CJ McCollum to slide into that gunner role at times, which he's best at. This team is just stacked on so many levels. But enough about the Pelicans in a vacuum. Let's look at how they match up with other teams in the Western Conference. And I'm gonna save the teams I think that give the Pelicans the most trouble. I'm gonna save those for last, obviously. But let's start with a team like the Denver Nuggets. Now, this series would definitely be a shootout. This is also a very huge team with Aaron Gordon and Michael Porter Jr. on the boards, but the last 2 playoff runs for the Denver Nuggets obviously didn't feature Jamal Murray, but they did feature Damian Lillard, Steph Curry, and Jordan Poole absolutely torching this defense for historic numbers on accounts for all of them. And we all know how that happens. You put Nikola Jokic in a pick and roll, he drops, and you give up open jumpers. CJ McCollum is gonna feast against the Denver Nuggets like he did back in the day on the Blazers when they went to the Western Conference Finals. He's gonna eat in that drop coverage. Brandon Ingram may not be taking a ton of pull-up threes, but that pull-up midi is gonna be there, and he's gonna be able to get all the way to the rim past Nikola Jokic on the perimeter, I would assume. And also, if Nikola Jokic is gonna be coming up on that screen, you're gonna have Zion Williamson or Jackson Hayes or Larry Nance or Brandon Ingram or Herb Jones or Trey Murphy, all these super athletic tall wings or bigs cutting from the baseline while Nikola Jokic is at the free throw line dropping on a pick and roll. And while Aaron Gordon is a good help defender, I don't think he's gonna be scaring that many people cutting baseline. Michael Porter Jr. has become a pretty decent shot blocker, but are we really that worried about his help instincts in that situation? I just don't believe this Denver Nuggets team can guard the Pelicans in any way. And I'm not saying the Pelicans are going to be able to stop them, but I do think having Jonas Valanciunas as just a big body to put on Jokic to lean against them for a 7-game series, I do think that's going to take a toll on Jokic in a 7-game series. I really do believe that. Brandon Ingram might be one of the only players in the league that can contest the Michael Porter Jr. jumper. I'm not counting on that. Aaron Gordon, we seen Steph Curry switched on to Aaron Gordon in the playoffs and Aaron Gordon still couldn't score. We're not worried about him at all. I think the Pelicans match up pretty nicely with the Nuggets. And I didn't even really speak on Zion, but Zion's going to be tough. You know, Jokic is a very big body. I know it doesn't seem like he's a good rim protector, but in a half-court situation, Zion's going to have to really, really elevate to get over Jokic. But I think he's going to get it done. I think he's going to have a lot of slips, a lot of cuts, a lot of those opportunities because, like I said, Ingram and McCollum and even Valanciunas with his three-point shooting, they're going to draw Jokic away from the rim. And at that point, you're relying on Aaron Gordon and Michael Porter Jr., and I'm not that worried about that. The Dallas Mavericks, they should always scare you because Luka could just dominate the series. You know, he could always do that. We've seen him torch Kawhi and Paul George in 2 years in a row. He could always just take over a series. But overall, I'm not worried about this team too much because I don't think their shooting is as great as it was last year. I don't think they're that level of shooting team, even though they got Tim Hardaway Jr. back. And I know they got JaVale McGee, but JaVale's going to play, 20, 15 minutes a game? Other than that, they have no rim protection. I guess Christian Wood can block shots, but I don't think Ingram and Zion and Herb Jones, I don't think these guys are thinking about Christian Wood at the rim. So I feel pretty good about the Pelicans' ability to score on this team. And I feel pretty good about the Pelicans' ability to guard Luka. I know that sounds crazy. Luka has absolutely torched him like he does everybody. But having Herb Jones gives me a little bit of confidence. Having Brandon Ingram, who I think is going to be deployed as a defender a lot more this year just because those arms, bro, you can contest a lot. Last year against the Suns, I felt like he should have been on Chris Paul more because he's the one player that can actually contest those fading mid-rangers. And yeah, I think he's going to be on Luka a little bit in that series if it were to happen. And like I said, obviously Luka can dominate the series, but this feels like a series that Zion's going to dominate. I see a ton of corner threes from Brandon Ingram in this series. Zion's going to kick it out from the post. And I like the Pelicans' chances in this series. I guess we could talk about the Phoenix Suns now. We seen that series last year. The Pelicans were so close to winning that series. If CJ McCollum doesn't foul out in Game 6, who knows what happens. But we've seen how the Pelicans match up with this team. We've seen how the offensive rebounding was a huge problem for the Phoenix Suns. We've seen how Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, Jay Crowder could not guard Brandon Ingram one-on-one. And now we're adding Zion Williamson into the equation. Who's guarding him? Is it DeAndre Ayton? I don't really love that matchup. I think Ayton's better at guarding bruisers, but back to the basket bruisers. I don't think Ayton has the foot speed to keep Zion with Zion's quick first step and Zion's handle in front of him. I don't see that happening. And I would just be very shocked if all this time Zion was out, he's not coming back with the ability to take the pull-up mid-range jumper. So if you're going to sag off all the way into the paint, I have a feeling Zion's going to make you pay with that mid-range jumper this year. At least I would hope. I would hope all this time off, all he's really been doing is taking jumpers. And I think he's going to be killing teams that sag off him this year. I know Devin Booker was hurt last year, but overall, I'm just not that worried about this Phoenix Suns team and the way they match up with the Pelicans. Even in the game Devin Booker got hurt, he had one of his best halves of his career, and the Pelicans were still winning at the time he got hurt. Chris Paul had to go 14 of 14 to win a game. DeAndre Ayton was not missing any little hook shot, any mid-range jumper. Mikal Bridges was not missing any mid-range jumper, and they still almost lost to this Pelican team. Without Zion Williamson, second-year Herb Jones, second-year Trey Murphy, I have no reason to believe the Pelicans would not beat this team if they match up next year. All right, the Memphis Grizzlies. This is where things start to get interesting. I don't know how much you guys want to take this into account, but the Pelicans are 6-4 against the Grizzlies in their last 10 games. And of those 4 wins, Brandon Ingram only played in 1 of them. Since becoming a Pelican, Brandon Ingram is 6-1 against the Memphis Grizzlies. I'm not sure what to make of that. This is going back to 2020 up until now, so this probably doesn't even matter. If I had to guess why it's been a pretty successful matchup for the New Orleans Pelicans, I'd guess the Grizzlies' main strength is really their rebounding. And against the Pelicans, that's not a strength at all. So usually their rebounding makes up for the fact that they're not a great three-point shooting team. But if you're going to play against a team that rebounds just as much as you and shoots better from 3 than you might be in a tough situation. And that's where they find themselves against the Pelicans a lot of times. And going forward, the Pelicans are going to have the advantage of just being able to get the easy twos, not the easy twos, the difficult twos, I should say, when you take into account who's taking them, when it's Brandon Ingram pulling up from 2, CJ McCollum pulling up from 2, or Zion Williamson bullying his way to the rim from 2. The Grizzlies only really have John Morant that is going to create 2-point opportunities. Other than that, we're going to live with Dillon Brooks creating a mid-range jumper. We're going to live with that. Desmond Bane, elite 3-point shooter, but we're going to live with him trying to put it on the floor to create a mid-range jumper. And this team's not a great 3-point shooting team, and the Pelicans can out-rebound them on a consistent basis. They do have the edge at rim protection, but like I said, Pelicans are going to be pulling up for those twos in the playoff series. And I think overall, the Pelicans could just outscore this team just enough to win a 7-game series, but I think it would be a tough series. Now, initially, I was thinking of the Minnesota Timberwolves as a tough matchup for the Pelicans, and they probably are. There's a ton of talent on that roster, right? But they added Rudy Gobert, and I remember as I was watching the Pelicans series, before we knew it was going to happen, I was thinking the Pelicans were going to win. I was hoping the Utah Jazz would win because the Pelicans match up better with the Jazz than the Mavericks or whatever, but I went through and I just went back and looked at all the times I remember Brandon Ingram absolutely torching Rudy Gobert in the pick and roll. It goes all the way back to even the Lakers days, Brandon Ingram's career highs against Rudy Gobert. I don't know, I like the matchup. Then I thought about how the Grizzlies went small, they took Steven Adams out of the game, and all of a sudden that forced Karl Anthony Towns to defend in space last year, and he looked atrocious doing it. Some of the worst fouls I've ever seen committed in a basketball game. So the more I thought about it, the less I was worried about this matchup, but we have to acknowledge the fact that Anthony Edwards can go for 40 any night, Karl Anthony Towns can go for 40 any night, D'Angelo Russell can go for 40 any night if he gets hot from 3, and regardless of what you think about Rudy Gobert, he still is an elite rim protector. He still is. Regardless of what I think, regardless of what you think, he's an elite rim protector. So that matchup would definitely still be a problem. But the more I thought about it, the more I think the Pelicans can win that matchup. All right, so I saved the 2 big dogs for last, the Clippers and the Warriors. Now, I'm gonna just be honest. This Warriors matchup is clearly the toughest matchup. My fear is that this team will just get up so many threes that the Pelicans won't even have a chance to stay connected, to stay within range in some of these games. Like, we all know CJ, BI, they love to get those mid-range twos. We all love them for it. We all think that's an important part of the game. But there might be a game in this hypothetical series where Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, and Jordan Poole all attempt 10 threes. That is very possible. And I'm not sure if the Pelicans can keep up with that. Now, where they might be able to keep up with that, where the Grizzlies kept up with them, is the fact that the Warriors are susceptible to a very good offensive rebounding team, which the Pelicans are the best offensive rebounding team in the league. But another thing the Grizzlies had going for them is the Grizzlies were one of the best teams in the league at forcing turnovers. Not necessarily something the Pelicans do well, but if Jose Alvarado can make Steph Curry his next victim, if Herb Jones can force Andrew Wiggins into some turnovers, and we all know the Warriors will give you a few turnovers by themselves. You don't even have to force them into all of them. We all know Draymond Green's gonna try some crazy passes. So the Warriors are gonna give you their fair share of turnovers, and that's how the Pelicans would have to win this series, in my opinion. They would have to win the possession battle. Kevon Looney can't get 22 rebounds in a game 6 like he did against the Grizzlies. That can't happen. Kevon Looney was getting rebounds, kicking it out to Steph Curry and Klay Thompson for 3. That's what the Pelicans cannot afford to happen in this hypothetical situation. But as of today, September 25th, this is the only team in the West that I would honestly say I'm picking the Warriors over the Pelicans, just for the math reasons that I just brought up. I think the Warriors are going to be able to get enough rebounds. I think Wiseman and Looney, Jonathan Kuminga is probably going to be much better rebounding this year. I think they have enough rebounding, and obviously they have enough shooting where I'm not sure we can keep up with them in the math game unless Brandon Ingram is consistently pulling up from 3, unless Zion Williamson comes back with a 3-point shot, or Zion Williamson comes back at 85% free throw shooter or something crazy like that. Otherwise, I don't see us keeping up with them in the math game. That's just how I feel about it. Now, the Los Angeles Clippers. Now, immediately, I think of the lack of rim protection might be a huge problem here. It was a huge problem in a play-in game. Obviously, there was no Kawhi, no Paul George, but this team could not stop the Pelicans from getting to the rim. Brandon Ingram was hitting absolutely ridiculous mid-range shots, so it's probably not even fair to judge them off of that game. I think if this series were to happen next year, it would probably be my favorite series in the whole playoffs. I think these teams match up so evenly. Kawhi Leonard's probably going to have to guard Zion Williamson. I would love to see that happening. I'm not saying who's going to win that matchup. You know, Zion has an advantage on a lot of these players because he could put the ball on the floor. Can Zion actually put the ball on the floor against Kawhi? That is yet to be seen. Paul George is probably going to have to guard Brandon Ingram. I would love to see that. Two of my favorite players in the NBA going head to head. Nicholas Batum did a great job on BI in the play-in game last year. It just didn't matter. But I think the Pelicans would win this matchup. I think the rebounding would be too much for the Clippers, and the versatility of the Pelicans. I actually think the Pelicans can go small on this team as well, and I think they would just out-athlete this Clippers team, which seems crazy to say, but Kawhi Leonard and Paul George have dealt with a ton of injuries. Are they really going to be running up and down the court with Jackson Hayes and Trey Murphy and Herb Jones? I'm not sure. Marcus Morris and Robert Covington, those guys don't scare me at all. I will take the Pelicans' wings over those guys. I definitely think the Pelicans should try to make this a up and down series, but even if the Pelicans go into the half court, like I said, I like the Pelicans rebounding more. If Kawhi Leonard is off the floor at any point while Zion is on the floor, there's a mismatch on the floor for the Pelicans. If Paul George is off the floor but Kawhi Leonard is guarding Zion, that is a mismatch for the Pelicans. Whoever's guarding Brandon Ingram, I'm rooting for John Wall. I hope he succeeds, but is he going to be able to guard CJ McCollum off of however many injuries he just went through? He also provides a spot for the Pelicans to help off of. Do we believe John Wall is going to come back knocking down shots? You would hope so, but that's not something I'm just believing in off the rip. Obviously, if everything clicks for this Clippers team, they can beat the Pelicans. Any of these teams can beat the Pelicans. That's not my point to say the Pelicans are just about to sweep through the playoffs. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying looking at these matchups, I don't see why the Pelicans should feel like they can't beat any of these teams besides maybe the Golden State Warriors. And me personally, I would pick the Pelicans over any of these teams besides the Golden State Warriors. Now, I could have brought up the Lakers matchup, but the Lakers is a wait and see. The Lakers is a wait and see. To me, there's really no point in even talking about the Lakers right now until we see what happens going forward. And like I said, I'm not being biased in making this video, but it is biased the way I'm describing it, right? I'm speaking from the Pelicans' point of view. So if you're a Minnesota Timberwolves fan, you're gonna tell me all the ways you think the Timberwolves have an advantage over the Pelicans. I understand that. If you're a Denver Nugget fan, you're gonna say, what are you talking about? Jokic is gonna dominate, or Luka's gonna dominate. I understand that. Trust me, I understand there's a different way to look at it for every single team. But I'm speaking as someone who's rooting for the Pelicans, so yes, there's bias in that, but everything I'm saying is logical, right? I'm not saying anything like, oh, Herb Jones is gonna average 20 points next year. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying everything the way it is right now, everything we know right now, the Pelicans, to me, have a very good chance of at least making the Western Conference next year. That's just how I feel. Let me know how you guys feel down in the comments below. Who do you guys think is the sleeper team in the West? All that down. Who do you think's winning the West? Most of you guys can say Warriors. But let me know all that down in the comments below. I'm out. Peace.